Now we're going to take a look at the idea of relative maximum and relative minimum for a function. A relative maximum is when we have a point where for a particular value, so looking at a relative maximum here for this graph, this point here would be a relative maximum. And the formal definition says that this means that in this interval around this point, this value f of a here is the largest value of the function in that area. Graphically, what it looks like is we are increasing, we reach sort of the top of the hill, and then we're decreasing. So graphically, the relative max looks like the top of the hill. A relative min, as represented by this point here, is a point that says in the area around this point, this value of the function, this f of x, or in this case, we're looking at b, so this f of b is the smallest value that the function takes on in this area over here, in this interval over here. So let's take a look at this particular function. What are the relative maximums and what are the relative minimums? So taking a look at relative minimums, we can see that here we have a point that is the smallest y value in this area. We also have another relative min over here. We also have a relative min over here. Now, notice these points are smaller than this point here. These y values are smaller than this y value here, but that doesn't mean that this value does not represent a relative min, because remember, we're using this term relative, which means in a specific area of our graph. Identifying these points here, we can see that we have minimum values where we have a y value of -5. So both of these have y values of -5. And here we have a y value of 0. So these are the minimum values. Let's represent these as pairs. So here we have the pair -5, -5. That's one of our minimums. We also have a minimum here where x is +5 and y is -5. And then we have a minimum here at the point 0, 0. So these show our x and y coordinate pairs that represent these relative minimum points. In regards to maximums, relative maximums, we can see that, change up my colors here, we have at this point here a relative max, and at this point here a relative max. And identifying this, we can see we have, when y is 2, we have maximum values, relative maximum values. Again, this word relative because these points are have the largest y values in this particular area, but notice our function increases both -infinity, +infinity in terms of x, +infinity in terms of y, so all these points would be larger, but it doesn't negate the fact that these are relative maximums in this particular area of our graph. We could represent these also with coordinate pairs. This would be -2, 2, and then this point here would be 2, 2. So this shows the graphic representation of relative max and relative mins. For our purposes of this course, this is all we can do with it. By looking at the graph. In calculus, you will have the tools to determine these max and min points with calculus and algebra.